The boarding gate felt like a different world, buzzing voices, the faint hiss of coffee machines, wheels of suitcases rolling over polished floors, but Amelia Hart barely noticed any of it. She walked with slow, deliberate steps, her silk scarf tucked neatly under her coat, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For the past week, she had been everywhere but home, 3 countries, back-to-back meetings, endless decisions that would determine the future of her company. She was used to pressure, but this had drained her in a way she couldn't quite hide. She wasn't taking the private jet tonight. She didn't want luxury, didn't want champagne served in crystal glasses. She wanted to be invisible, just another tired traveler heading somewhere far away. So she had booked a regular, commercial flight, hoping that maybe, for a few hours, she could just be. Her boarding pass read 1 for B. She slid into the row, placing her carry-on in the overhead compartment with the kind of precision of someone who liked everything in its place. It was then she saw him, sitting by the window, a man with dark, slightly messy hair and a face that carried quiet strength. Next to him sat a boy, no more than 8, his head barely reaching the top of the seat. The boy clutched a small, well-loved dinosaur toy with one arm and leaned into the man's side with the kind of trust only a child has. "Hi," the boy whispered, almost shy. As his big brown eyes met hers, Amelia felt the corners of her mouth lift just slightly. "Hi," she replied softly, not wanting to disturb the calm around them. She wasn't here to make small talk, but something about the child's gentle voice lingered in her thoughts. As she settled into her seat, the plane doors closed, the engines hummed, and as the flight attendants went through their safety instructions, Amelia's eyelids grew heavier. She let herself sink back, breathing in the quiet rhythm of the cabin. The hum of the engines was almost hypnotic, and somewhere between takeoff and cruising altitude. Her head tilted, landing softly on the man's shoulder. She didn't notice at first, but when she stirred awake, feeling the warmth beside her, her eyes opened in startled embarrassment. I'm sorry," she murmured, quickly straightening. His lips curved into a small, reassuring smile. "It's fine. You look like you needed the rest." His voice was calm, low, and steady, the kind that could make a storm feel far away. That was when she noticed something she hadn't before. His arm was wrapped protectively round the boy, keeping him secure in the seat. The child's breathing was slow and even, his toy still clutched in his hand, and the man's eyes, they were red, not from tiredness alone, but from something deeper. "Long flight for him?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying more curiosity than she meant. The man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Longer for me," he said simply. Something about the way he spoke, like there was more behind his words, made her want to ask. But she didn't, not yet. She wasn't sure why she cared, or why she couldn't look away from him. The cabin lights dimmed, casting a soft glow over the rows of seats. Outside the window, the world was only darkness and the distant glimmer of stars. Amelia closed her eyes again, but her thoughts were restless. There was something about the stranger beside her, something unspoken, yet heavy, like a story that was waiting to be told. She didn't know that by the end of this flight, she would hear it, and she didn't know that hearing it would change her life forever. Amelia woke again when the soft clink of cups signaled the start of drink service. The cabin had settled into a hushed rhythm, the kind of quiet that only existed on long overnight flights. Most passengers were dozing, some staring blankly at the in-flight map glowing on tiny screens. The boy was still sleeping, his cheek pressed against his father's arm, the little dinosaur tucked safely under his chin. The man glanced at her as the flight attendant leaned down to take their order. "Just water," he said. His voice was polite, almost cautious, like someone who had learned not to ask for more than he needed. Amelia ordered tea, even though she doubted she would finish it. She didn't know why she spoke, but her words came before she could stop them. "You travel often?" He gave a quiet laugh, not of amusement, but of disbelief. "Not anymore. This trip, this is different." Her instincts told her to let it go. Small talk wasn't her thing, but something about the way he glanced down at his son before speaking again made her lean slightly closer. Different how he hesitated, as if weighing whether to answer "We're going to London. My boy, he has an appointment there." The words were simple, but the pause between them felt heavy. Amelia noticed the way his hand rested protectively on the child's shoulder. "I hope it's a good appointment," she said gently. Leaving the door open, his gaze softened, but his eyes carried something that felt like an entire year's worth of sleepless nights. "It's important. Maybe the most important trip we'll ever take." He didn't elaborate, and Amelia didn't push. The flight attendant returned, placing her tea on the tray table. Amelia wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, letting the steam curl against her face. She thought about all the trips she had taken for business. Countless flights, each one a blur of meetings, contracts, and deadlines. But this man's journey, it wasn't about deals or profits. It was about something far more real. A few rows ahead, someone coughed. The hum of the engines filled the quiet between them. Then the man spoke again, almost as if he needed to say it to someone, anyone, before it got too heavy to carry alone. "My name's Jack," he said. "Amelia," she replied. He nodded once, then looked out the window at the black expanse of night. "My son's name is Oliver." She glanced at the boy, memorizing the soft curve of his cheeks and the peaceful way he slept. "He's a good traveler." Jack smiled faintly. "He's stronger than anyone gives him credit for." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Amelia felt an unfamiliar ache in her chest, not pity, but a quiet kind of respect. She didn't know their story yet, but she wanted to. Outside, the stars seemed impossibly bright against the darkness, like tiny promises scattered across the sky. The plane flew on, somewhere between one life and the next. What Amelia didn't realize was that this man's story would soon spill into hers, and by the time they landed, neither of them would be able to go back to the lives they had before. This night, the cabin was still dim, but Amelia found herself too awake to close her eyes again. Jack's words lingered in her mind. "The most important trip we'll ever take." They weren't the kind of words people said lightly. She glanced toward Oliver, still sleeping soundly, his small hand curled against his chest. That quiet innocence made her wonder what could weigh so heavily on a father's shoulders. Jack noticed her looking. "You can ask," he said quietly, without turning his gaze from his son. "Ask what?" she replied. Though she knew exactly what he meant, he looked at her then, eyes steady. "Why we're going?" Amelia hesitated. She didn't want to intrude, but something about his openness told her he wanted someone to hear it. "All right. Why are you?" Jack exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. "Oliver has a rare heart condition. Doctors where we live, they can't do much more. But there's a specialist in London who's willing to try a procedure. It's complicated, risky, but it might give him a normal life." The words hung in the air between them, heavy but honest. Amelia didn't speak right away. She thought about how she had spent the last week negotiating deals worth millions, how people had fought over percentages and margins, and here was a man whose whole world depended on one child's heartbeat. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Though she knew the words were small compared to what he carried, Jack gave a faint smile. "Don't be. We've been blessed in ways I can't explain. Friends, old teammates, even people I haven't spoken to in years. They helped raise the money for this. I'm not sure how to thank them. I'm not sure I ever can." Amelia felt something shift in her chest. She had met countless people in her career, but very few spoke with the kind of humility Jack carried naturally. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for show. "And you?" Jack asked, breaking her thoughts. "What takes you to London?" She almost laughed, though not from humor. "Work. Always work." He studied her for a moment, as if reading between her words. "You must be important where you work." Amelia tilted her head slightly. "Why would you say that?" "The way you walk, the way you hold yourself, like someone who's used to making decisions that matter, and having people listen." She didn't answer right away. No one had ever summed her up so quickly, and with so few words. "I'm the CEO of a company," she admitted quietly, unsure why she suddenly felt reluctant to say it. Jack didn't react with surprise or intimidation, the way most people did. Instead, he simply nodded. "That explains the exhaustion." Amelia found herself smiling for the first time that evening. It wasn't the polite smile she used in meetings. It was small, real, and unguarded. The seatbelt sign chimed on as the plane hit a patch of turbulence. Instinctively, Jack's arm tightened around Oliver, and Amelia noticed the way his body shifted to shield the boy without thinking. It was the kind of reflex born from years of protecting someone. The lights flickered briefly before steadying. Amelia glanced out the window. Nothing but darkness and the faint glow of distant cities far below. She wondered how many people were awake in those cities, carrying stories as heavy as Jack's. When the turbulence eased, Jack leaned back, but his eyes didn't close. She realized then that he probably hadn't slept deeply in months. His attention was always on Oliver, even now. High above the clouds, Amelia wanted to ask more, but something told her the rest of his story would come in its own time. She didn't know it yet, but that time was closer than she thought, and when it came, it would pull her into a choice she never expected to make. Somewhere over the Atlantic. The cabin had grown quieter than before. The hum of the engines was the only steady sound, blending with the occasional soft sigh of passengers shifting in their sleep. Amelia sat with her hands loosely folded on her lap, but her mind was far from calm. Jack's words from earlier still echoed, each one settling deeper the longer she sat beside him. Oliver stirred in his sleep, letting out a small whimper. Jack instantly shifted, adjusting the boy's blanket and murmuring something so low Amelia couldn't make it out. The moment Oliver's breathing steadied again, Jack relaxed just slightly, though his arm remained protectively around his son. "You've done this before," Amelia said softly. "Done what?" "Stayed alert, even when you're exhausted." Jack smiled faintly. "Comes with the job description. When you're a parent, especially the only one, they rely on you for everything. Sleep becomes optional." There was no bitterness in his tone. If anything, there was pride. Amelia studied him for a moment, wondering how someone could carry so much and still manage to speak with such calm. The flight attendant came by to check on them, offering snacks and drinks. Jack refused, but Amelia accepted a small packet of crackers. She opened it quietly, then held it out toward him without thinking. He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I know," she interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "But I want to." After a moment, he took one and thanked her. They ate in silence for a while, but the quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It felt steady. Outside the window, the night sky had begun to lighten just slightly at the edges, a faint line of pale blue brushing against the black. Amelia found herself staring at it, remembering how many flights she had taken where the sunrise was just another thing to ignore. While she dove into emails, this one felt different. Jack noticed her looking. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" She nodded slowly. "I used to see it all the time. I never really looked at it." He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way he had earlier. "Maybe you just needed the right reason to look." The words caught her off guard. Though she didn't let it show, for years, her life had been about moving forward, chasing the next achievement. She didn't know when she had last slowed down enough to really see anything. A sudden announcement from the captain broke her thoughts. There would be another hour of relatively smooth flying before mild turbulence near the coast. Amelia glanced at Jack, who gave a small shrug, as if turbulence was the least of his concerns. "Do you mind if I ask, what happened to Oliver's mother?" she asked quietly, aware the question might tread on delicate ground. Jack's expression shifted, not to anger, but to something more thoughtful. "She was wonderful," he said after a moment, "but she got sick. It happened fast, too fast. One day we were planning his 5th birthday. The next," his voice trailed off, and Amelia didn't need him to finish. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice steady but sincere. Jack nodded, his gaze drifting back to Oliver. "It's been just us ever since, and that's enough for me. He's everything." Amelia felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the altitude. She wanted to say something, anything that could carry even a fraction of comfort, but she knew no words could touch that kind of loss. Instead, she let the silence stand, a quiet acknowledgement between them. Somewhere ahead, the horizon was growing brighter. Soon the cabin would wake, passengers stretching and blinking against the light. But for now, it was just the three of them in that small bubble of night, each carrying their own stories, And though Amelia didn't yet realize it, the next words Jack would speak before they landed would set off a chain of events that would follow her far beyond this flight. The first hints of sunrise spilled softly through the cabin windows, washing everything in pale gold. Amelia noticed how the light touched Oliver's face, making him look even more peaceful than before. Jack, however, wasn't watching the sunrise. His eyes were fixed on his son with the same quiet focus he had shown all night, as though the rest of the world barely existed. Amelia sipped the last of her now cold tea, her thoughts moving faster than the plane itself. She had told herself this was just another flight, just a few hours of anonymous travel before slipping back into the demanding rhythm of her life. But Jack's story, and the way he carried it, had chipped away at that certainty. "You said earlier," she began softly, "that this might be the most important trip you'll ever take. Is it because of the surgery?" Jack nodded slowly. "It's not just the surgery. It's the chance for him to have more days like this. Days where he can laugh without running out of breath. Days where I don't have to watch every movement, wondering if it's the one that will hurt him." Amelia swallowed, the weight of his words settling heavily in her chest. She thought of how many nights she'd stayed awake over contracts and numbers, things that seemed so important at the time, but felt impossibly small compared to this. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked. Jack's eyes softened. "Every day. But then he smiles, or says something that makes me laugh, and I remember why I can't stop." There was no dramatic swell in his voice, no attempt to impress her with his devotion. It was simply the truth, spoken by a man who had built his life around one promise: to never let go. The seatbelt sign chimed again, warning of the turbulence ahead. Amelia felt the slight shift of the plane beneath her feet, but Jack didn't even flinch. His focus stayed entirely on Oliver, adjusting the boy's seatbelt gently without waking him. A part of Amelia wanted to ask what would happen if the surgery didn't work, but something inside her told her not to voice that question. Instead, she found herself saying, "You're stronger than you think you are." Jack glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You don't really know me." She shook her head. "I've met people who looked strong but weren't. You carry it differently." For the first time since they'd met, Jack looked away from Oliver long enough to really meet her eyes. There was something unspoken there, a mixture of gratitude, surprise, and maybe even the faintest flicker of trust. Outside, the turbulence began to stir the plane, the horizon now glowing bright orange. Passengers around them were starting to wake, stretching and yawning. Amelia knew the landing was coming soon. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt an unexpected heaviness in her chest, the kind that comes when you realize you're about to leave something unfinished. Jack broke the silence again. "You ever feel like you meet someone at exactly the moment you were supposed to?" The question caught her off guard. "Sometimes, but I've always been too busy to think about it for long." He nodded slowly, as though filing away her answer. Then, with a quiet certainty, he said, "I think this was one of those moments." The words hung there, fragile and real. Amelia didn't know what to say, so she didn't. But deep down, something told her he was right. What neither of them knew was that before this flight ended, one small moment would force them into a choice neither had planned for, a choice that would tie their lives together far beyond the moment they stepped off this plane. The plane began its slow descent, the captain's voice calm over the intercom as he welcomed everyone to London. Outside, the clouds broke apart in soft streaks, revealing patches of a waking city far below. Amelia felt the shift in the cabin, passengers collecting their belongings, adjusting jackets, exchanging polite murmurs. But between her and Jack, the space felt strangely still, as if the rest of the world hadn't quite reached them yet. Oliver stirred again, his small hand brushing against Jack's. The boy's eyes opened halfway, still hazy from sleep. "Are we there, Dad?" he mumbled. "Almost, buddy," Jack said gently, tucking the blanket away. "Just a little longer." Amelia smiled faintly at the exchange. It was so ordinary, yet it carried the weight of everything she had learned about them in the last few hours. She wondered what awaited them beyond the arrival's gate. Hospital corridors, long nights, difficult conversations. As they waited for the final approach, Jack reached for a worn leather bag under his seat. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and smoothed it out on his knee. It was covered in colorful crayon scribbles, hearts, and stick figures. Oliver beamed. "I made that for the doctor," he told Amelia, his voice brighter now. "So she knows I'm brave." Amelia felt her throat tighten. "I think she'll know the moment she meets you," she said softly. Jack glanced at her, and though he didn't say anything, the look in his eyes was full of something unspoken. A quiet thank you, not just for the words, but for being present. In a moment that mattered, the wheels touched down with a gentle thud, the cabin filling with the sound of reverse thrusters. People began standing, pulling bags from overhead compartments, but Amelia stayed seated. She wasn't ready to say goodbye yet. When the aisle finally cleared, Jack stood and reached for his bag. "Well," he said, "this is where we part ways." She hesitated. "Maybe not entirely." He raised an eyebrow, curious. "I mean," she continued, "if you'd like, I could check in, see how things go with Oliver. Sometimes it helps to have one more person in your corner." For a moment, Jack just looked at her, as though weighing whether this was an offer born from politeness or something deeper. Then he nodded slowly. "I'd like that." Oliver grinned, clearly liking the idea too. "You could come visit the hospital," he said. Amelia smiled. "I'd like that even more." As they made their way through the jet bridge, the crisp London air rushed to meet them. The terminal bustled with travelers, some reuniting in tight embraces, others hurrying toward their next gate. Jack led Oliver toward a small group of people waiting with warm smiles and open arms, friends, perhaps, or family ready to help. Amelia lingered for a second, watching the reunion. She could have walked away then, blending back into her world of business meetings and deadlines. But something inside her shifted, the same quiet pull she had felt since she first leaned against his shoulder hours ago. She stepped forward, catching Jack's attention one last time. "I'll be in touch," she said. And though she didn't yet know how, Amelia was certain of one thing. This wasn't the end of their story. If anything, it was only the first chapter of something that would change all three of their lives, in ways none of them could have predicted. Some journeys, she thought as she walked away, don't end when the plane lands. They only truly begin.